Hello everyone, my name is Vandana Sinha and I am an occupational therapist at PlayStreet Specially Able Educare Trust, Bangalore, India. PlayStreet is an organization that provides educational services to help the child with special needs become independent and live up to their potential. We offer parents empowerment program, an integrated schooling program, and a variety of clinical services. As April is Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, we want to bring you the pioneer in the field of autism to guide us all and spread more awareness and knowledge. Today is our third talk, and our fantastic speaker for today is Miss Lucy Bowen. Miss Lucy is a play therapist from UK and founder of National Association for Play Therapy India. Since 2014, Miss Lucy has been working hard to promote play therapy throughout India and create more awareness around vast array of benefit that play has to offer. Miss Lucy has extensively studied child development and psychology, along with child and family therapy, and continues to both review and conduct research in the field. She is a part of International Play Therapy Study Group, which includes only 35 select play therapists from around the world. Miss Lucy has worked with children over the 90 years in variety of roles in UK, Asia, and Africa, and specialized in working with those with special needs. She has worked intensively with the children, teachers, and caregivers and has dedicated her life to helping children to reach their full potential, regardless of any physical, mental, emotional, or socio-economical disadvantage that they may have. And today we are talking about developing play and how to connect using play therapy. Thank you, Miss Lucy, for agreeing to join us at a PlayStreet Autism Hour today. We are honored to have you here. Hope you are doing well today. And would you like to say a word to our viewer?
No, just thanks very much for having me, and thanks everybody for listening, and hope that it can be of help to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Miss Lucy. So let's get started with today our first discussion and first question. So as we know that play and learning is the main occupation of any child, and children love to play. So what is the play therapy and how it different from the natural play?
Okay, so the British Association of Play Therapists, they define play therapy as the dynamic process between the child and the play therapist, in which a child explores at his or her own pace and with his or her own agenda those issues past and current, conscious and unconscious, that are affecting the child's life in the present. So similar to natural play, in play therapy, the child takes the lead. It's a child-centered approach, and so the therapist follows the child's leads and interests. So if we consider natural or free or unstructured play, however, this can really be considered anything that is undertaken purely for fun and an enjoyment, and it generally doesn't have any other kind of objective. So a child will engage in play simply because it's fun and it can provide amusement. And this could be playing alone or it could be playing with others. So whenever a child engages in play, however, there's always learning. The self-awareness, motor skills development, the building of resilience, social skills, emotional regulation, creativity, imagination, problem solving, language and communication. Essentially play improves all areas of development. So in play therapy then, a trained play therapist can work alongside the child to facilitate and empower, harnessing the therapeutic powers of play to facilitate communication, foster emotional wellness, increase personal strengths, as well as enhance social relationships. So the difference between free play then is really kind of the therapeutic relationship in play therapy, which is the key to utilizing change. So play therapists don't take on an authoritative position and direct the child, but rather they build on their natural play interests, being non-judgmental and holding the child with positive regard. So play therapists don't work to modify a child's behavior or to change the child, but rather they facilitate the child's growth by working to address underlying reasons for the challenges, thus empowering the child to bring out changes within themselves. So play is the natural language of the child. And so play therapists are trained to understand this and use this mode of communication to facilitate growth and to instigate change.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. You had like very nicely explained what is the free play and what the therapists usually, how they use the play as a therapeutic tool. And from your many year of experience, please explain to our viewers how the play development is different in the neurotypical children and the neurodiverse children.
Okay, so it's really important to understand that all children are capable of engaging in play, and it's important to understand that play is different for everyone. So play for neurodiverse children, however, may often look different. For example, it could be lining up or spinning objects. And there's this kind of common misconception that play has to involve toys. However, play can really be anything, and play is different for everyone. So it's really the fun, the stimulating and engaging interactions that occur that actually make it play. Now, for example, if I take a pen and you think, oh, that's a pen, that's for writing, but if I start to tap it around, make some music with it, then that becomes fun and stimulating for me, and that can be considered play. So for neurotypical children, you generally find that they will naturally progress through the different stages of play, starting with sensory and embodiment play. Children then start to explore toys and external objects. They start to engage in projective and pretend play, and then role play. And for neurotypical children, they generally are able to engage in all these types of play by the age of 7. But for neurodiverse children, however, they may sometimes get stuck and need assistance to progress. I've worked with children, adolescents, and even adults who are still at the sensory stage of play. And this can hinder their overall development, not only their play skills. So as we find that neurodiverse children, neurotypical children, they may naturally explore their environment, which enables them to gain an understanding and progress through the various stages of play. But neurodiverse children, however, may have less awareness, less of an interest and engagement with their surroundings, and may therefore not naturally progress unless we help and facilitate this. And the same kind of goes for the development of their social play. Neurotypical children might naturally tend to progress from solitary to collaborative play, when neurodiverse children again may struggle with appropriate skills, and they may often play alone. So again, we might need to facilitate that more social play with neurodiverse children. And you would also find sometimes that neurodiverse children might also engage in more ritualistic and repetitive play patterns, which can also restrict their play development.
True, true. Very, very nicely explained, Miss Lucy. And why we thought that play therapy is very important tool for individual with developmental delay, and what are the different kind of challenges or maybe issues by the children that can be addressed by the play therapy?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, play therapy can assist, and play in general can assist with the holistic development of children. And it could therefore help to bridge the developmental gaps that have been missed or not mastered. And there are several key stages that are often missed or underdeveloped in neurodiverse children. And most of these stem from a lack of sensory exposure. So the first being that kind of developing that interest in the world. You know, we can sit a child down and get them to identify 50 flashcards, but if they still walk into a room and they don't engage, then that knowledge is kind of worthless. You know, we want a child to be able to walk into the room and engage, to understand, oh, there's a chair, or there's a table, or the floor is hard. And this only happens when the child gets a connection to their environment through the stimulation of their senses during play. And once a child develops the interest in the world, then they start to distinguish between objects and people, and they start to engage more meaningfully. And that's when intentional communication will start to begin, you know, not just trying to communicate needs. And as the child engages more productively in their environment, their problem-solving skills will increase as their symbolic and pretend play starts to develop, and they have this felt sense of what's real. So their emotional understanding develops, as does their ability to think abstractly. So I think it's really important to note here that, you know, engaging in play and helping the child to progress through the various stages of play, it's not only about building skills, but it's actually about helping children to develop these life skills. You know, helping children progress through the stages of play is what helps to form a basis for their growth of identity and independence. It further develops their imagination. It contributes to a child's resilience and flexibility. And essentially, it gives the child the experience and skills they need to be part of the social world. So engaging in play will assist with the child's overall development in general, but however, in play therapy, our main focus is also on the child's social and emotional well-being. So by following a child-centered approach, we're working to build confidence and self-esteem, to help children to make sense of their life experiences, how to engage in the world, how to interact and communicate with others, how to regulate their emotions, how to become more adaptable and accept changes, how to solve problems, how to become independent decision makers, how to manage challenges they might face in their everyday lives. So essentially, play therapy can really assist children who have any forms of social, emotional, behavioral challenges or deficits.
Very, very true, Miss Lucy. And you have explained very nicely how play can be a holistic tool. Play is a holistic tool to develop not only the skills, not only the motor skill, but also the emotional well-being, the self-regulation, and self-awareness, self-building, the self-confidence, everything. Play, through the play, we can work on any of the aspect of the child.
Yes, absolutely. And we work on everything together. I think that's why it's so important. We just don't have to think, oh, I'm doing this area of development today or this area of development. Everything gets worked on kind of simultaneously.
Yes.
And it's fun and stimulating, so it motivates the child to also be engaged.
Yes. So how can parents find out or figure it out that their children will benefit from the play therapy? Or by what age they can start? And is it, we say always play, so is it only for the young children or toddlers?
No, absolutely not. Play therapy can be utilized for children and adults of all ages. And play therapy is generally employed from kind of 3 years up. But when we're working with neurodiverse children, we can use therapeutic play from as young as kind of 18 to 24 months old. And obviously early intervention is always recommended, but it's never too late to start. You know, as I mentioned, play therapy can really help with any social, emotional, and behavioral challenges the child or the adolescent might be facing, as well as work to enhance their overall development. So it could be, signs could be, you know, things like a lack of interest or engagement in the environment. There could be behavioral challenges such as difficulties with transitions, anger outbursts, high anxiety, school refusal, poor social skills, difficulty in forming relationships, difficulties with emotional regulation, challenges in accepting changes, difficulty in entering into new situations, difficulty with accepting responsibilities for actions or understanding perspectives of others, poor impulse control, communication skills. Really, play therapy can help in all areas of development where there are deficits or challenges, but our focus will always be on the child and the child's emotional well-being.
Okay, so can we say that the play therapy can benefit to any child as early as age possible, 18 to 24 months, and by any age they can do the play therapy?
Yes, absolutely. And especially, you know,
Okay.
I've worked with a lot of adolescents and even young adults who there's been real gaps in their play development, and that's impacted on their, the ability to actually develop specific life skills. So actually going back and engaging in play and rebuilding those stages that have been missed or not mastered can really help children, adolescents, or even adults of any ages. I've worked with even 40-year-olds who are completely detached from their environment, and we've gone back and engaged in sensory play, and it's enhanced their engagement, their communication, their confidence, and increased their independent engagement even at that later age.
Yes, yes. So now we want to little bit more want to understand about the stages of play development, as we know that there is a developmental ages of the play also. So does play therapy take stages of play development into account, or does it only target the peer interaction and social interaction?
No, it absolutely considers the stage of development. So in play therapy, we meet the child at their current developmental level, and we work to help them further progress through the developmental stages of both individual and social play. And there is kind of this misconception of play or play therapy needing to be in groups or alongside peers, but really there are individual skills that children need to first develop before they're able to attend to a group or a social setting. And these can be targeted in our individual play therapy sessions.
Okay, okay. But are the play therapy approaches are different according to age group? Like, could you please explain us how we understand that, how to identify the play developmental age of the child?
Yeah, so it's important to understand that the developmental age and the playability of the child might not necessarily correlate with their chronological age when we're working with neurodiverse children. And so interventions would be based on the child's ability and their stage of play rather than specifically on their age. Now, for example, I might have a 4-year-old who can engage in pretend play, but an 18-year-old who might still be at the sensory stage of play. So it's important to take that stage of play into consideration. So signs that a child or even an adult or adolescent is still at the sensory stage of play would include things like a lack of interest or awareness in their surroundings, and unable to engage in what others might consider normal play activities. So that could be a disinterest or a lack of focus, repetitive play. There might be sensory seeking behaviors or just this kind of lack of meaningful independent engagement. So these would all be signs that the child needs sensory play and hasn't progressed past that stage of play. A child at the kind of more projective stage of play might engage in play using toys and materials more functionally, creating stories with toys, using toys to project their thoughts, feelings, and experiences. Whereas a child at the role play of stage of play would already be starting to take on roles and characters within their play. For example, acting out being a mum or a teacher or a superhero. So we therefore need to assess the child's stage of play rather than consider only their age. Because an 18-year-old, for example, might be considered to need to work on appropriate social skills. However, if they're stuck at the sensory stage of play, we wouldn't be able to use role play, for example, to model social skills. We need to first go back and help the young adult to progress through those different stages of play before we could specifically address that. So it's really about meeting the child or the client, where they are at that moment in time and building on that.
Okay. Okay. So, can play therapy address the situation where the children have no interest or no motivation in the play, especially like if we saw the children of 9 year, 10 year of the age, they have always in the one or another therapy sessions, and everything for them is a task or activities to do by force. So, how the play can be a motivational factor, how we can include the play therapy and increase the motivation or build the motivation to that children.
Yeah, so absolutely. So if we've got children who we see that have a lack of interest or motivation to play, this is usually due to the kind of misconception that the child should be playing appropriately with toys. But for children who have a lack of interest, we need to go back and first start kind of with sensory play, as sensory play is the foundation for all learning and development, as well as the development of play skills. Because play doesn't actually start with toys and materials, rather play actually starts with the body and the environment. And that's how children actually start to get connected to themselves and understand what's happening around and start to become more intrinsically motivated to actually engage. And from there, we can start to introduce toys and different materials and encourage different types of play. But first, the child has to get that connection and that motivation and that awareness of themselves and their environment. And that's all developed through sensory play.
Okay, as you talked about sensory play, please explain to our viewers more about the sensory play. What is that? Is that a free play, or is it for only for the toddlers? So please explain to our viewers about more about the sensory play.
Yeah, so no, sensory play is definitely not only for small children, although it's definitely beneficial to introduce sensory play, start to stimulate the senses, from when the child is very, very young, because sensory play provides the foundation for all learning and development. It's through sensory play that the child learns about themselves as well as the world around them. So sensory play is really anything that stimulates any of their senses. So things to touch, things to hear, things to taste, things to smell, things to see, anything that stimulates the different senses. And that's how children learn about themselves as well as learn about the world around them. So as we provide a different variety of sensory play and different sensory stimulation, children then begin to understand what they see, what they hear, what they feel. And this then helps them to better engage with their environment, which improves their focus and their attention, as well as their understanding. You know, very often people think, oh, my child's really hyperactive because he's moving from one thing to another thing to another thing. And very often this is because the child's not understanding what's actually happening around them. So if they go to one thing and they don't know what to do with it, they go to another thing, they don't know how to do with it, they go to another thing, they don't know how to do with it. But the more sensory input we provide, the more the child's able to process and make sense of what's actually happening around them and begin to engage kind of more functionally and more productively. And so from a very young age, it's important to provide the sensory stimulation. And very often, if that stimulation hasn't been provided, that's when children might be stuck in specific areas of their development and have difficulties with things like relationship building, communication, emotional regulation, executive functioning, because we can't necessarily work on these higher level skills if the child doesn't have this connection or understanding of who they are and what's happening around them. So yeah, obviously, it's, as I said, it's the foundation for all learning and development, but it's all sensory play is also something which is really, really helpful for regulation as well. You know, sensory play, if we've got hands-on, if we're being, that's why fidget toys and things have become so popular right now, because holding something in our hands, stretching, manipulating different materials, it can help to keep us focused. It's also something which helps to bring our arousal levels down. It can reduce anxiety. It can reduce hyperactivity. It can provide an outlet for releasing frustration. You know, there's really unlimited number of benefits for sensory play. So I think it's also really important to note that just because a child might be able to engage in higher levels of play or activity doesn't necessarily mean that sensory play is not also still required as well. I think, and especially if children have high sensory needs, it's important to understand that that's always a need. So, if you're trying to sit a child down to do a specific activity, but their sensory needs haven't been met, it's going to be very, very difficult for the child to concentrate on that activity. It's like if you're hungry and somebody tells you you have to complete 5 tasks before you can eat your lunch, you're not going to be thinking about the task, you're going to be thinking about how hungry you are and that you really need to eat. And it's the same for kind of children who have sensory needs. It is a need. So it's really, really important that that sensory play and those sensory input is kind of provided regularly for children. And of course, in terms of helping children to concentrate in classroom settings or other settings, integrating sensory materials along with those day-to-day activities can also really help to improve attention and focus and regulation. And you'll find the more that you do provide sensory play activities and different kind of materials to the child, that children will slowly over time learn to naturally seek out those kind of sensory input from their environment and learn how to actually regulate themselves.
Great. So you have explained very well about the sensory play. So just for our viewers, maybe I can summarize a little bit more, and please correct me.
Nope.
So what I understood, it is any material, any tool which is available in the environment and give a stimulation to any of the sense, and children can use that material tools as a play and explore the world around them and about themselves also.
Yes.
So that's what happened in sensory play. And is it important if we do play therapy or any other way also? It will go by the development of the stages of the play, like sensory play and then the symbolic onlooker play, symbolic play, and then games. Is it important to look at the each stages if we are planning to go at the play therapy?
Yeah, so in our first few sessions with the in a play therapy session, we have all toys and materials available within our play therapy room for the child to freely choose how and what they engage with. So the way in which the child engages with the material would give us an understanding as to the stage of play that the child's at. So for example, if the child is just picking up things and flapping them around, or if they're just lying on the floor, or if they're just throwing all the objects on the floor, then that would be give us the idea that the child is still at the sensory stage of play, and we need to be engaging in sensory play with the child. Whereas, for example, if the child started picking up the animal figures and they started to make a story, then we'd understand that they're at that projective stage of play. If they put on a superhero mask and started being Batman, then we know that they progressed to that kind of role play stage of play. So we'd be able to join the child in whichever type of play, you know, they're able to do. And if they are at the lower stages of play, then we would be able to work on helping the child to progress to the next stage of play.
Great. And very important for any therapy sessions, or if we go for any to help the child, the first step where we work is the building the relationship. So how can we build a connect with the child with the play therapy, or using a play therapy as a tool?
So we follow certain principles in play therapy, which are to be non-judgmental, to hold the child with unconditional positive regard, and we join the child in their play. We follow the child's leads and their interests, and we use their interests as an entrance into the child's world. So we don't try to redirect their play anymore in any way. Rather, we join them in whatever they're playing. So, and when we find that when we show a genuine interest in them, they naturally become more interested in us and more able to accept things that we might introduce into their play, which kind of then builds this shared world. And we don't question the child, but rather we use tracking and reflecting. We provide a narrative to the child's play and to the child's thoughts, their feelings and their experiences. And generally the language then, it helps them to gain an insight into their thoughts, feelings and experiences. And we also use a lot of animation and expression, which, you know, makes both the play more interesting as well as making us more interesting. And this then helps them to develop more of a social interest, as well as understand components of nonverbal communication, as well as the language of others. And that you'll find that when we build this positive relationship with the child, it encourages them to further develop their play, as well as to build confidence and trust in others, which promotes you know, their ability to actually and their confidence to enter into new relationships with others as well.
Great. So we as a therapist also, we want to know how the play therapy structure look like, or maybe how we can blend it in the other therapy sessions, maybe in a OT or maybe in the speech. Can we blend it, and how different from the other child-led or any behavioral approaches?
Yeah, so in a play therapy session, there wouldn't be any specific structure, because we would be following the child's lead, and we trust the child to take the session where they need it to be in that particular moment in time. You know, we might have a child who's come in and they've engaged in pretend play for the last few sessions, but then they might come in and just be throwing the toys all over the room another session, and they might just need to engage in sensory play because they might have had a really stressful week, and they might need to engage in a different type of play in order to help them regain a sense of control over themselves and their environment, and they might need sensory play to aid with their regulation. So in play therapy, we always go at the pace of the child. We don't attempt to hurry the therapeutic process along at all. And we might sometimes integrate more directive activities if we feel it's appropriate to work on social skills development, emotional regulation or something, but these are never forced on the child, and they're only ever introduced for the benefit of the child and not to kind of hurry along the therapeutic process. So we move at the pace of the child, and obviously we do use specific techniques to facilitate and empower that growth within our session. So I think it's quite difficult to different to other kind of more behavioral approaches and more structured approaches, as we're not looking to kind of modify the behavior of the child, but rather to address the underlying reasons for the behavior. And we have the understanding that all behavior is communication, and we try to facilitate that communication and understand the needs, the feelings, the thoughts, the experiences of the child, and help them to kind of manage these. Obviously, I provide a lot of play therapy. I'm a play therapist, but I provide a lot of play therapy training to special educators, to occupational therapists, to speech therapists. And absolutely, there's lots of principles of play therapy, you know, that can kind of be introduced, you know, understanding the level and the stage of play of the child to make sure that your interventions are appropriate, following the child's lead. I think understanding that there can be learning to come from any kind of situation. So for example, you're in a speech or occupational therapy session, and one of the goals is that the child has to, stacking cups, for example. A lot of the time children might just be tapping the cup, and we see a lot of therapists who would try to stop them from doing this and to make them kind of stack the cup. Whereas what we would think about in play therapy is, okay, we're going to make the child stack the cup hand over hand, and the child might do that in that particular moment. But the minute you go away, the child's probably going to go back to tapping the cup. So rather than doing that, maybe we could join the child in tapping the cup. We could introduce tapping fast, tapping slow. We could count. We could take the cups to our eyes and play peekaboo to encourage social interaction. So thinking about more creative ways in which we can join the child. Once the child's interested in something, you can build and expand on that rather than trying to stop the child from doing what they wanted to do and do something that you wanted them to do. Because what the child's doing is something that they're finding fun and stimulating. So we're going to get much more of a positive response if we kind of build and expand on that rather than trying to redirect the child. And it's the same with our kind of language. If we provide a narrative to what the child's doing with a lot of animation, with a lot of expression, you'll find that those words have more meaning and have more interest for the child than rather if we just kind of, say the child's playing with a train and we're saying, oh, what color's your train? Where's your train going now? Who's on the train? What's the train doing? You'll probably find your child's going to throw the train across the room and become very frustrated. But if the child's pushing the train and you've got more expressive language, or the red train, choo choo, given some language, given some animation, those words then add more to the child's play, and you'll find that you get more of a positive response. So doing tracking, reflecting, animation, expression, joining the child, following their interests, not trying to modify, but rather build and expand on their interests. I think these are all kind of techniques that can be kind of integrated into kind of any form of therapy.
Great. Thank you for explaining so well. So I would like to understand, as you said, if the child is want to just shake the blocks, and we should allow the child to do that. But if sometimes what happens, the child has the stereotype behaviors like flapping hands or flapping of the toys, manipulating the any item they hold, and they could be a sensory avoider, they could be a sensory seeker. So how you plan your play therapy session with those children? Because the many parents come to a child is not playing with the balls, they are just manipulating that or shaking that. What the advice you will give to those parents, how to work on those things?
Yeah, so if the child's engaging in quite repetitive play and not engaging in more meaningful and functional play with the toys and materials, that would be a sign that the child's not fully at that stage. So that would be a sign that they're still at the sensory stage of play. So for one thing that we would recommend is engaging in lots of sensory play, providing lots of different and varied sensory stimulation. So it can be sensory balls and bottles, Play-Doh, musical instruments, messy play, rice, dal, shaving foam, Mida. All of these things are a really great way to get the child to become interested and aware of things in their environment. And obviously then we can build and expand on this, add in spoons and cups, and then we can start to feed puppets. We can build and expand from that sensory play to develop more awareness and more kind of meaningful and functional play. And in addition to that, it's important to understand that these ritualistic and repetitive behaviors, they serve a purpose for the child. So it might be that the child is seeking sensory stimulation. That's why they're engaging in such behaviors. It might be also that there's too much sensory stimulation in the environment. So the child might tap an object so that they can focus on that and filter out everything that's happening. Same thing if the child's feeling very anxious, if they engage in something which is familiar and repetitive, this can help them to calm down and reduce that kind of anxiety. So it's important, I always feel that if the behavior is not causing a harm to the child or to the parent, that's not necessarily something that we need to immediately stop, because we need to understand that it's serving a function for the child. But we can also, through play, help the child to further their understanding of their environment and learn different ways and different strategies in which they can cope and engage. And in terms of if they are engaging in that repetitive play, as I said, sensory play would be really important. But again, if the child's engaging in that repetitive behavior, use that repetitive behavior or that repetitive play as an entrance into the child's world and a way of forming a connection. If the child is tapping with the cups, join them in tapping with the cups, and then model different ways in which they could use the cups. So tap fast, tap slow, maybe get some clay or get some of your sensory balls and start to put them inside the cup. So the child, you know, when they start to tap the cup, it feels different, it looks different. So we're building and expanding the child's world using that material that they're engaging in the repetitive play with as an entrance and a means in which to do that.
Great. Hope this will help to the parents. So next question I would like to ask about the children with the autism. So how we can build the social and emotional skills, also willingness to communicate with the others through play therapy, as most of the children with autism, many of the children with autism are non-verbal.
Yeah, so through play, that's how children do learn about themselves and the world. And as I said, sensory play is really that foundation. And as children progress through the different stages of play and as they engage in play, they start to learn to express and regulate their emotions. And obviously children, even if children are non-verbal, the benefits of play therapy is we're providing multiple means of communication. Children can communicate through play, through art, through music, through storytelling, through role play. You know, there's lots of different ways in which children can actually learn to communicate and to communicate things that they might not be able to put in words. So when children actually play out their experiences, that helps them to actually understand it. Children learn to express and regulate their emotions through play. When we're following the child's lead through play, this provides them with a feeling of control over themselves, over their environments, which again helps with emotional regulation. Children learn different coping strategies, even through sensory play. What different materials help me to feel calm? Which different materials help me to feel stimulated? So again, they can learn regulation. And, you know, playing with the child and following the principles of play therapy, this also provides them with a positive relational experience, which builds their confidence and self-esteem to feel confident to enter into new relationships with other people as well, because if children feel that they're bad at something, or if they feel they're met with too much pressure or demand or expectations, then often they will withdraw from a specific situation. So engaging in play, following the child's lead, that helps to build their confidence and self-esteem, because there's no right or wrong way to play. And there's multiple outcomes in play. So children naturally become more flexible. They naturally start to develop their problem-solving skills. And you'll find that as the child develops their play skills, you'll generally find an increase in interaction and communication, especially when you join the child in their play. And interactive play then can help children to understand social relations more. Children learn to share, to take turns, how to play together. And these kind of animated expressions and creativity during play, it helps the child to develop a social interest, and the introduction of fun and stimulating materials promotes engagement and cooperative play. And obviously the unconditional positive regard that a child receives during play, so this lack of instruction or expectation, it also aids the child in building relationships, which increases their confidence to engage in social situations as we promote their self-esteem through these positive experiences during play. And when a child has reached the more projective and role play stages of play, you know, we can use puppets, we can use role play, we can use social stories to play out social situations, to allow the child to explore and experiment with different behaviors and outcomes in a safe and kind of non-threatening environment, which can enable them to figure out appropriate behaviors and responses to social situations. And we can also have group play therapy sessions, and those which especially utilize sensory-based materials. So music, movement, sensory trays, messy play, all these can be especially beneficial in group sessions, especially with children who have less social skills or less ability to attend to activities within a group. Because you'll find that engaging in activities without any expectation to perform in a particular manner can promote independent engagement and encourage natural engagement and interaction with peers without the fears of kind of doing it wrong. Therefore, it boosts their confidence and self-esteem. You know, when children just dance freely, that builds their confidence. When children play with shaving foam, it might be that there's another shaving foam's gone on another child, so they might start to touch them, or another child's clapping to spray the foam everywhere, so children start to imitate other children. So activities like this work really well in group settings to allow social skills and peer interactions to kind of organically evolve.
Great. Thank you, ma'am. So as you mentioned that through play, we can build children's social and emotional skills and communication also. One more important thing which we find the children with autism is difficulty in the ideation and imagination. So through play therapy, how we can build that? So we say now always the child is in this self play. So next stage, we want the child to go in the next stages of play. It could be symbolic, it could be role play. How we can follow that?
Yeah, so we would just build and expand on whatever it is that the child's interested in. So say, for example, the child's really interested in cars, then we might use that cars as a way to further build and expand their play. So the car might be going and visiting a farm. The car might be going, so you introduce all the animals. The car might be going for a car wash, so you introduce the water. Maybe the car's going to the beach and you introduce the stand. And then on the beach, you might introduce shells and stones. So it's about building and expanding on the child's interest and being more creative and more imaginative that way. Train track is something that I find children with autism respond really well to. At the early stage of kind of projective play or pretend play, I find the child often just builds the track and then they just kind of push the train around and round, so the play can be quite limited. So I might start by adding houses and trees and creating a scene around the train track. Then I might start to, maybe I take some green Play-Doh and that represents grass and I put some animals on that. Maybe I take some Lego and I start to build a bridge over it. Maybe I introduce some people and I'm creating a story and around something that the child is already interested in to help further expand and build on their creativity and their imagination.
Great, thank you, ma'am. Hope this idea will help to our parents. And one question I would ask: how the parents can develop play at home? Could you give some tips, some ideas, what the materials they can use, what the toys they can use, and how they can build or develop the play in their children?
Yeah,
In home
absolutely.
setting.
Yeah, so I mean, from the very start, I mean, sensory play is really the foundation. So it's really important to understand this child's stage of play. So if you bought the child toys and things, but the child's not engaging with any of those, then you need to go back and engage in sensory play. And you can really, obviously you can buy sensory balls, you can buy musical instruments and things like that, but really you can engage with anything you've got around the house. You can take pots and pans and spoons and, do some drumming with those, big spoons, little spoons, plastic spoons, wooden spoons, metal spoons. There's so many different things just in the house, buttons and marbles, and you can go in the garden and pick up stones and sticks and leaves, and you can go in your cupboard and take out your mitre and your flour, or go into your bathroom and fill the bath and add bubbles and shaving foam. There's so many different ways that you can just collect things from around the house to engage with, and that will promote that and help you to build that relationship with the child, as well as getting the child to actually become interested in play. And play with the child, that's really, really important, rather than just, a lot of parents might think, oh, my child's got sensory needs, so I'm just going to leave them alone in the corner with a tub of dal and they're going to play. But children often have quite restrictive play, and children's world are only as large as what they've been exposed to. So if we expose our children to very little material and different things within the environment, then the child's understanding of the world is going to be very, very small and very restricted. So the more materials that we can introduce to the child, the larger their world becomes and the greater their understanding. So if your child's got a tray of dal and they're just kind of flapping their hands around and you leave them to play alone, the child's just going to continue to flap their hands around in the dal. But if you're playing with a child, you can model, we can shake it, we can add spoons, we can add cups, we can pour it. We're playing with rice, we can add food color. We're playing with shaving foam, we can add different colors. We're playing with water, we can add glitter, we can add color, we can add bubbles. So all the time, build and expand the child's exposure as well as their experiences, introduce different materials, introduce different concepts in very, very fun and playful manner. And, if the child's not much interested in toys and materials, then don't focus straight away on just the functional use of toys and materials. Be very creative. Think about different ways I could use those materials. So if I'm trying to get the child to be interested in a cup and spoon, maybe first add that to my tray of dal, and rather than just forcing the child to spoon the dal and put it in the cup. Maybe I'm going to take the spoon and I'm going to flick the dal at the child. So it's providing that kind of visual stimulation. Then the child gets interested to start to explore the spoon. And then and we're pouring from the cup, maybe pouring from up, pouring from down. And then once they become interested in those materials, then we can start to model more functional ways to kind of actually engage with those types of materials. If you know that your child is a visual seeker, then use visual stimulation as a way to provoke interest in different materials. Tap things, move them around so that the child becomes interested in that thing, because you're stimulating the visual, which is what they're interested in. If it's auditory and you want the child to be interested in something, you tap it so the child draws the child's attention to it. So pick up on the child's sensory preferences and utilize those things to your advantage and to provoke more interest and engagement. And if your child is playing with toys and things, join the child, let them lead and direct you, provide them with that experience of control, show a genuine interest, build and expand on their play rather than trying to modify or redirect it all the time. Use a lot of animation, use a lot of expression, provide a narrative to the child's play, add language in a way that adds to the child's play rather than all the time kind of questioning and is going to take away some of the fun.
Great. So there are some great tips for our parents that you can use any material available at home in which the child is interested. Always you can allow the child to take the lead and follow the child. And then you can put some imagination, gestures, and then voice modulations and expression. So you can do multiple things at home to develop the play. Thank you. Thank you, Miss Lucy. So here I would like to take our last question. So could you please explain and show a small activity to use in a play therapy session?
Yes. So I'm just going to show, well, it's kind of two activities, but it's developed from one activity. So a really old play therapy, almost a very, very old technique is something called the squiggle game. And the squiggle game is literally when the child and the therapist work together and they take it in turns. So it works on turn taking, it works on collaboration. And it starts by either the therapist or the child first would just draw a kind of a squiggle on a piece of paper. And the child then has to turn this into a picture and maybe create a story or tell us something about that. So here I've just turned my squiggle into a Christmas tree. So, this encourages children to express themselves. It's working on turn taking, collaboration, social skills. It's also encouraging creativity and abstract thinking. But what I found a really useful way to modify this intervention when working with children with autism, because they often might have difficulties in understanding different perspectives and understanding that people can think in different ways. Their thinking can be quite rigid sometimes. So they might be thinking there's just a right or a wrong answer. They might have difficulty in adapting, in flexibility, and accepting that people have different views. So something that I quite like to do is to get both, it can be done in groups as well as in an individual session, or parents can do this with their children. It's something really easy. It would just be everybody who is working. Everybody in the group, whether it's the parent and the therapist or the child, or we just basically each have a piece of paper that has the same shape on it. So it's just a triangle in this example. So the idea then would be that every person would then just turn this triangle into a picture. So you might have one person might just create a house. One person might create a kite. So essentially, it's really just helping the child to kind of expand their theory of mind, helping them to understand different perspectives, that people can think in different ways, accepting of people having different views. And obviously, because it's an art-based activity, it's allowing for expression, it's encouraging creativity. And obviously, when children draw, when children create something, this is also really helpful for building their confidence and self-esteem as well, because children experience a sense of pride and accomplishment in actually creating something and enjoying something. And actually, the very first time I did this activity with a child with autism, we drew different pictures, and I said, but we've drawn something different, but that's okay. The first thing was, no, that's not okay. But over a period of time of doing this activity, you know, she started to understand, you know, that people can have various perspectives. And it's also a great way for kind of talking to children with autism about how their brains do work in different ways, and how everybody thinks differently, and how that's okay as well. So in children helping their own kind of their own diagnosis and the acceptance of their brain maybe working in different ways to other people, this can be quite helpful as well.
Yes, yes, that's very true. And also maybe we can use any medium also. If we are using like triangle or any shapes, we can do in any medium, like it could be on the sand or it could be on the grains, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It works really well if we've got children that kind of still have quite high sensory needs. Then you can just get a handful of dal or rajma or something like that and get them to create a picture with that, or something that also works really, really well. And that works really well in group settings as well.
Yes, yes. Okay, thank you, Miss Lucy. So here we are done with our discussion today, and on the behalf of PlayStreet team, I extend a very hearty thanks to you, Miss Lucy, for your valuable time and for sharing your knowledge with us. And I hope today we all gotten more ideas from Lucy about why play is important in each area and every step of child development. I hope we all understood how play build relationship, bring purposeful movement in natural way, and enhance motor skills, promote language, cognition, and strengthen emotional development, and so on. Play can be a very holistic tool to our children to form relationship, build movement, and practice consciousness to gain self-confidence and sense of competence. Today, we got a more awareness and knowledge and ideas from Ms. Lucy on play therapy and how we could put it together all the tips and techniques to help our children take the small successful steps in every day. Thank you everyone for joining today, and take care. Bye bye.